So I will remain on the 23rd with no delusions as to what the EU is. The worst vote is a Remain vote, pledged in the false belief that the EU is some benign bestower of progressive rights. The answer to this debate may be, from a leftist perspective, brutal, clear, stark, and actually devoid of hope, that they are both the worst option. And from a left strategical viewpoint, whether at national or EU level, I'd remember the words of Allende in the early days of the coup in Chile, when he said to the young militants, "We have the government, but we do not have the power." And whatever the outcome after the referendum, that should frame all leftist thinking and emergent leftist groups. We have the government, but we do not have the power. Where does power lie, and how is leftists to achieve that? And the project of the left is that, to repoliticise and to achieve power. So Europe has been moving into an era of reaction for some time. The right has always been goose-stepping into the abyss, while the supposed well-intentioned Blairite neoliberals and EU supporters have been sleepwalking into that darkness. And the schism between liberal centre-left intentions and neoliberal economics has never been more apparent. An organisation for those of good faith, supposedly saving us from the World War and its benign inclusiveness, has been exposed as the institutional tool of global finance. Now, for Blairites and their inheritors, they waged war on socialism, and they resolved to banish class analysis. They thereby created a void in political consciousness, telling people that class would no longer exist in this bright future. So when oppression is experienced collectively and systemically, it's always going to allow nationalism and fascism the political right to claim the ground and to group people together in more reactionary ways, to give them the narrative over why we are not being treated fairly. However, this vote is a matter of strategy, of how best to reclaim that ground and provide a politically conscious alternative, to politicise people in terms of class and systemic economic exploitation. Of course, most of the mainstream debate is a sham. It's like finding yourself involuntarily transported into the young Tory debate at the Oxford Union. And the leading protagonists, as we seen in the Thames yesterday in this debate, are so rich that it doesn't really matter about the outcome of the discussion, as they're too privileged to experience the consequences. But voting Leave will not produce or facilitate a discussion about democracy. Just as a vote against the Good Friday Agreement, as advocated by some socialists, would never have resulted in a rise to prominence of a leftist alternative. It would merely been a statistical byproduct of the victory of more reactionary strands of unionism. So too, a Leave vote will allow the right to pick over the ruins of the laws and regulations that fall. There is no left exit on offer. The question for us is who will be in power. It will be a Tory government. We will swap one free market privatising Thatcherite version for a more red-blooded version fueled by populism, anti-migrant sentiment and the full weight of the Murdoch media behind it. Despite what Chris Bambury and others are claiming that such an outcome will fracture the Tory party, Cameron and Osborne are one and the same as Boris Johnson and Michael Gove. It's a public school debating society standoff. And the left should not give credence to the false claims about saving the NHS, etc., by people who've been planning to privatise and destroy it. They will be the victors. Where in any of the mainstream debate have ordinary people been discussing how the European Commission is unelected? The narrative isn't there. If anything, a Leave vote will fracture the Labour Party, and I speak as a Labour Party member. The Parliamentary Labour Party are going after Corbyn anyway. And he will be deposed by neo-Blairites who will make claims about his kind of politics not being electable, about him being a useless, weak leader, about how we should be more like the Tories. This is taking a step back in order to try and take a step forward. Corbyn, as I'm sure he would himself acknowledge, is not important as an individual, but he represents over 60% or more of the Labour Party membership and affiliates, and he represents that growing opposition to neoliberalism that is taking place in other countries too. When he is deposed, there will be an increasing fracture in the Labour movement rather than a collective coming together around that leadership, and his enemies will relish a Leave vote. The narrative of the left will be lost in a bonfire of reaction. So of course the EU is vile. Any indictment that you want to lay at the feet of the neoliberal EU, I will sign and support. But last night in the Dáil, Richard Boyd Barrett, of People Before Profit, demonstrated the problem is more complex than simply the EU. The Irish government were attempting to bury an EU directive for country-by-country publication of corporation tax avoidance. and that was thwarted and tried to be hidden away by the corrupt Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil government. But leaving will not open up a space for debate that might democratise the UK. It will continue that foreigners and migrants are to blame for the destruction of the NHS, for inequalities in housing, education, employment, etc., and it will set workers against workers. There is grounds for solidarity across Europe. It is better to rejoin those connections, often in abeyance of the common enemy, the EU, rather than to fall back to the delusion that the UK Parliament is a fully democratic and untainted by global capitalism, for that's precisely the narrative that wins with the Leave vote. It's a matter of sharpening people's consciousness about what is wrong with the EU and not lapsing into the mainstream account of how wonderful the British Parliament is. It's about exposing how the EU and the UK state are enthralled to global capitalism. And Leave vote will simply endorse the scapegoating of Polish plumbers and migrant workers in the NHS. The fight should be against all institutions, and the clarity of that politics should not blunt itself by giving a media victory to the forces of reaction. The socialist line on Scottish independence is that we don't need the UK state to show solidarity with people in England, Wales or Northern Ireland, but there's common resistance across those borders, and the same will apply to the UK in relation to Europe with a Leave vote. But as it happens, the governing narrative, hence it's important to be strategic and clear about which narrative will prevail, assisted in the election of a Tory government in the UK, the wipeout of Labour in Scotland, and the use of English nationalist fears south of the border. The SNP narrative about self-determination has resulted in left-wing voters endorsing the party, even though they are supported by Rupert Murdoch and the Scum newspaper, and they're in favour of corporation tax cuts, and are backed by some of the most unsavoury capitalists you can imagine, and who can forget how they fawned over Trump until they could make political capital in the other way. In the UK, you will have people claiming they are left-wing, voting for self-determination in these kind of skewed terms. But remember, there are still elites in the UK more than happy to liaise with global elites. In these terms as well, it's a perfect ecosystem for left as radical or left-wing. In English politics, the Tony Benn tradition of leftism is a nostalgia for a British Parliament that never existed, and that's the worst kind of nostalgia. And as leftists, we shouldn't be doing what the Tea Party in America do from the right perspective of looking back to a time that never really existed, of the nation state, of the welfare state. History's moved on from that. We must understand this. So it's possible to fight the EU and your own government at the same time, and to connect your struggle with those protesting TTIP and other trade deals across the globe. It's possible to hijack the EU and its institutions and have a European of Commons. And Greece shows exactly what happens when you're isolated by global capitalism, as did Labour in the 70s when it went to the IMF. It was not just the EU who were the vultures. China and Russia circled the corpse of the Greek state waiting on Brexit to see how they could gain. The reality is this: there is no escape from neoliberalism. These are dark times and many struggles have to be fought, but we won't desist ourselves by facilitating an already dominant narrative in the UK about the UK's supposed ills, foreigners. It is better to propose that we are already engaged in a joint struggle with others to seize control of large supranational institutions and to make our own, to fight together against the global enemy in all its local and worldly manifestations. There is hope. Syriza at first inspired, and their humiliation then enraged the left across Europe. Podemos, the M25, the German workers resisting TTIP, the French strikers out in the streets now. Let's support the sparks of resistance throughout Europe. Slavoj Žižek says that dominant ideology today makes the possibility of radical change seem impossible. Yet they do not feel unthreatened, and that they do not feel immune. And more than financial contagion, they're more worried about left-wing anti-austerity contagion within the EU. If Europe is declared dead, I ask you, which Europe? The clock is ticking on the EU's neoliberal construct, and the space is still open for another Europe based around a shared, repoliticised, emancipatory project. This is why one should avoid the temptation to react to the state of permanent financial crisis with a retreat to the nation state. The nation state is easy prey for floating international capital, which can play one state off one another or one national union off against another. You can control as much of the state as you wish, judiciary, civil service, etc., etc. But today corporations are bigger than states, and you cannot control the global economy. As international socialists, we should desire sovereignty beyond the state. The reply to every crisis should be more internationalist and universalist to counter the universality of global capital. The left must not retreat to 20th century battles that it lost, but it must fight on a 21st century battlefield. And as Allende said, we do not get to choose the terrain on which we fight, we receive it. And what is wrong with the EU is exactly the same thing that is wrong with the UK or Ireland or the world. And I'd like to finish with this point, that the migrants flowing into Europe are seeking a utopia. They're looking and desiring to reach a Europe that does not exist. And those like me advocating a social Europe, a Europe of commons, are seeking a utopia Europe, a Europe that has never existed. And I believe it is better and is more socialist and internationalist in character to say our project should be the fulfilling of those aspirations to build that Europe. And if I want to seem ridiculous and over-optimistic and a fantasist, I would say it's better to fight for that utopia than surrender to the dystopia that we're seeing play out in this Tory referendum. Thank you, comrades.